Imagine for a moment that you are the President of the United States. You're sitting in the Oval Office, staring at a map of the world, when something unsettling hits you. Your rivals are moving faster. The ice is melting. And there's a massive frozen blind spot sitting right in your strategic backyard. So you do what any red-blooded capitalist superpower might do. You pick up the phone, call the Prime Minister of Denmark, and ask a simple question: how much? When Donald Trump floated the idea of buying Greenland in 2019, the world laughed. The media treated it like a fever dream. Denmark called the idea absurd. Late-night hosts had a field day. But here's the twist most people missed while they were busy making memes. Trump wasn't the first American president to think this way. He was actually the third. The United States has been seriously exploring the idea of acquiring Greenland for more than a century, not because of ego, not because of headlines, but because of minerals, military positioning, and control of the Arctic as the planet warms. This isn't a political story. It's the story of the biggest real estate deal that never happened, and why the United States still hasn't stopped trying. Welcome to the Arctic Cold War. Let's rewind. The year is 1867. The U.S. Secretary of State is William Seward, fresh off buying Alaska from Russia, a move critics mocked as Seward's folly. Gold and oil would later turn that joke into a masterstroke. What most people don't know is that Seward wanted more than Alaska. He ordered internal studies exploring the acquisition of Greenland and even Iceland. The logic was brutally simple. Control North Atlantic choke points, dominate shipping routes, project American power deep into the Arctic. Domestic politics buried the plan, but the idea never died. Fast forward to 1946. World War II is over. Europe is shattered. The Soviet Union is rising. President Harry Truman understands the next war won't be fought in trenches. It will be fought in the sky, with bombers flying over the Arctic. So Truman makes Denmark a formal offer: $100 million. Not paper money, not bonds, gold bullion. The U.S. Joint Chiefs of Staff called Greenland indispensable to the security of the United States. If hostile bombers crossed the polar route, Greenland was the interception point. Denmark declined. So the United States changed strategy. If it couldn't buy the house, it would rent the guest room forever. In 1951, a defense agreement granted permanent U.S. military access to Greenland. That foothold still exists today. And here's a detail few people talk about. Denmark has sold territory to the United States before. In 1917, America purchased the Danish West Indies, now known as the U.S. Virgin Islands. So when Trump brought it up decades later, defense planners weren't laughing. They were nodding. Now let's talk geography. On a flat classroom map, Greenland looks like a frozen blob at the top of the world. On a military map, it looks like a gate. Strategists call it the Greenland-Iceland-UK corridor, one of the most important naval choke points on Earth. If a Russian submarine wants to reach the open Atlantic, it usually has to pass through this corridor. NATO watches it with sensors, patrol aircraft, satellites, and decades of underwater surveillance. Control Greenland, and you control the western wall of that gate. That's why Greenland is often called an unsinkable aircraft carrier. Ships can sink. Carriers can be destroyed. An island cannot. Distance equals reaction time. Reaction time saves lives. That's why the United States operates Thule Space Base, the northernmost American military installation on Earth. Its radar systems scan constantly for missile launches over the polar route. Now add resources to the picture. Beneath Greenland's ice lies a massive cache of rare earth elements. These materials power smartphones, electric vehicles, satellites, radar systems, and modern weapons. Here's the strategic nightmare for Washington. China controls the vast majority of global rare earth processing. Even when these minerals are mined elsewhere, they often end up refined in China. If that supply were restricted, Western manufacturing and defense production would feel the shock immediately. Greenland represents one of the few realistic long-term alternatives. And that's why foreign investment there sets off alarm bells. But this story isn't just about maps, minerals, or missiles. Greenland is home to real people. A small population with a deep connection to the land, a strong sense of identity, and a complicated history with foreign powers making decisions on their behalf. As ice melts and global attention intensifies, Greenland finds itself at the center of a quiet but dangerous struggle. Not over ice, but over power. Final thought. The United States doesn't want Greenland because it needs more land. It wants Greenland because the world is changing. For centuries, global power flowed through warm oceans. In the coming decades, it will flow through the Arctic. Greenland sits at the center of that future. The ice is melting, and as it disappears, it's revealing something far more dangerous than water: ambition. Greenland, the world's largest island, captivates the imagination with its stark and untamed beauty. Towering icebergs, massive glaciers, and deep fjords carved by ancient ice sheets form one of the most breathtaking landscapes on Earth. This land of the midnight sun, where polar bears roam and whales breach icy waters, holds a powerful allure. But beneath Greenland's natural splendor lies something even more powerful: strategic importance. Greenland's geographic location makes it one of the most critical territories on the planet. Positioned between North America and Europe, it commands vital Arctic sea lanes. As climate change accelerates the melting of Arctic ice, these routes are becoming increasingly navigable, dramatically shortening trade paths between Asia, Europe, and North America. This new accessibility has transformed Greenland into a focal point of global trade and military strategy. In a rapidly changing world, the island has become a coveted prize. In 2019, Donald Trump shocked the world when he publicly expressed interest in purchasing Greenland. Many dismissed the idea as absurd, yet behind the headlines was a deeper truth. The United States recognizes Greenland's growing geopolitical value. Though the proposal was met with disbelief, U.S. interest did not fade. Diplomatic efforts increased, aiming to strengthen ties with Greenland and reduce its reliance on Denmark. This sustained attention highlights how central the Arctic has become in a new era of great power competition. Greenland's strategic value is rooted in geography. It sits astride Arctic sea lanes that are becoming increasingly ice-free. Control over these routes offers massive economic and military advantages. Its proximity to North America also makes Greenland ideal for military infrastructure. The United States already operates Thule Air Base, a critical installation for missile defense and space surveillance. As tensions rise with Russia and China expands its Arctic ambitions, Greenland's importance will only continue to grow. Beneath Greenland's ice and permafrost lies another source of global interest: natural resources. Vast deposits of rare earth elements essential for modern technology are buried below the surface. Iron ore, uranium, zinc, and lead are also present in significant quantities. These resources could transform Greenland's economy and elevate it onto the global stage. However, extraction carries serious environmental risks. Balancing economic development with environmental protection remains one of the island's greatest challenges. Amid global attention, it is crucial to remember that Greenland is home to a resilient people and a vibrant Inuit culture. Though small in population, Greenlanders possess a strong identity and a deep connection to their land. They are pursuing a vision of sustainable development that balances economic growth with environmental protection and cultural preservation. The government is investing heavily in renewable energy, particularly hydropower, to reduce dependence on fossil fuels and strengthen self-sufficiency. Their goal is clear: any future development must benefit their people and protect their way of life. Climate change is transforming the Arctic at an alarming pace. As ice melts and temperatures rise, new opportunities and new dangers are emerging. Shipping routes are opening. Resources are becoming accessible. Global attention is intensifying. This has sparked what many describe as a new Cold War in the Arctic, as major powers compete for influence, access, and control. With increased activity comes the risk of environmental damage and potential conflict. Greenland now sits at the center of a global geopolitical chessboard. Its future is intertwined with climate change, great power rivalry, and its evolving relationship with Denmark. Although Greenland gained self-rule in 2009, Denmark still controls foreign policy and defense, an arrangement that may change as Greenland seeks greater autonomy. The future of Greenland hangs in the balance. Whether it can navigate the pressures of global politics, climate transformation, and resource development while preserving its culture, environment, and sovereignty will define not only the island's destiny, but the future of the Arctic itself. Greenland does not exist in isolation. Every glacier crack, every shipping map redraw, every foreign investment proposal echoes far beyond the Arctic Circle. To understand why Greenland matters now more than ever, you have to zoom out and see the full system forming around it. Because what is unfolding is not a single land dispute. It is a slow-motion restructuring of global power. The Arctic system awakens. For most of human history, the Arctic was a wall, a frozen ceiling to the world that armies could not cross, navies could not patrol, and merchants could not profit from. Empires rose and fell without ever touching it. That era is ending. Satellite data shows that Arctic summer ice coverage has declined dramatically over the past 4 decades. What was once a permanent shield is becoming seasonal. What was once impassable is now merely difficult. And in geopolitics, difficult is just another word for temporary. This shift changes everything. Shipping companies do not think in ideology. They think in fuel costs, insurance premiums, and transit days. A container ship traveling from Shanghai to Rotterdam through the Suez Canal typically takes more than a month. Through Arctic routes, that journey can be shortened by weeks. Fewer days at sea mean less fuel burned, fewer crew costs, and faster inventory turnover. Multiply that by tens of thousands of voyages per year. The Arctic is no longer a wilderness. It is an emerging highway. And Greenland sits beside its on-ramps. This is why every major power with global ambitions is now Arctic-facing, not because they love ice, but because they love leverage. Russia's northern fortress. No country has moved faster in the Arctic than Russia. Russia possesses the longest Arctic coastline in the world. For Moscow, the Arctic is not a frontier. It is a backyard. And over the past decade, Russia has been militarizing that backyard at an accelerating pace. Abandoned Soviet-era bases have been reactivated, new airfields carved into permafrost, radar systems deployed, missile defenses upgraded. Russia's Northern Fleet, based near Murmansk, is its most strategically important naval force. This is where its ballistic missile submarines operate, forming the backbone of its nuclear deterrent. Those submarines rely on access to the Atlantic. And that access runs straight through waters Greenland helps control. From Russia's perspective, Greenland is not neutral geography. It is a potential choke point controlled by a rival alliance. This is why Moscow watches every U.S. move in Greenland with suspicion. It is why Arctic patrols have increased. It is why Russian bombers regularly test NATO airspace near the GIUK corridor. The Arctic is not frozen peace. It is cold tension. China's long game in the ice. Unlike Russia, China is not an Arctic nation by geography, but it is an Arctic nation by ambition. Beijing officially describes itself as a near-Arctic state, a phrase that has no basis in geography but immense meaning in strategy. It signals intent. China's interest in the Arctic is not military first. It is economic first. Shipping lanes, fiber optic cables, resource extraction, scientific stations that quietly double as data collection hubs. China plays the long game. Where Western countries argue over budgets and elections, China signs 30-year infrastructure agreements. Ports, airports, mining partnerships, research funding. Each deal is individually benign. Collectively, they form a footprint. In Greenland, Chinese firms have repeatedly expressed interest in airports, ports, and mining operations. Some proposals were blocked under pressure from the United States. Others proceeded quietly before scrutiny caught up. This is the strategic fear in Washington. China does not need to own Greenland. It only needs influence. A port that services Arctic shipping, an airfield that supports logistics, a mining operation that controls critical materials. Influence compounds. Once embedded, it is hard to remove without confrontation. This is why Greenland has become a pressure point in U.S.-China relations, despite being thousands of miles from Beijing, the United States, and the Arctic reset. For decades after the Cold War, the Arctic faded from American strategic planning. Budgets shifted to the Middle East. Attention moved to counterterrorism, and later the Indo-Pacific. The Arctic was assumed stable. That assumption is gone. In recent years, U.S. defense strategy documents explicitly name the Arctic as a region of strategic competition. Investments in icebreakers, satellite coverage, and Arctic training have increased. But here's the problem. The United States has limited Arctic infrastructure compared to Russia. It has fewer ice-capable vessels, fewer northern bases, fewer ports adapted to polar conditions. Greenland helps close that gap, not symbolically, physically. It extends American reach northward. It anchors radar systems. It shortens response times. From a purely military planning perspective, Greenland is not optional redundancy. It is core architecture. This is why the conversation around Greenland never truly ended after 2019. It simply went quiet. Strategic real estate, not colonial fantasy. Critics often frame U.S. interest in Greenland as colonial nostalgia or imperial arrogance. That framing misses the point. Modern geopolitics is not about flags on maps. It is about systems. Who controls data flows? Who secures supply chains? Who sets standards? Who builds first? Greenland is valuable not because it can be ruled, but because it can be integrated into missile defense networks, into satellite tracking, into Arctic logistics, into energy grids. This is why Washington increasingly talks about partnership rather than purchase. Buying Greenland outright would be legally, ethically, and politically explosive. But embedding Greenland into American-led systems achieves much of the same strategic effect without triggering global outrage. That is the quiet pivot. The Greenlandic dilemma. For Greenlanders, this attention is both opportunity and danger. On one hand, global interest brings investment, jobs, infrastructure, a chance to reduce dependence on Danish subsidies. On the other, it risks turning Greenland into a chessboard square rather than a society. Greenland's population is small, but its internal debates are complex. Some see independence as inevitable. Others fear economic shock. Many worry about environmental damage. Almost all want respect. The memory of being spoken about rather than spoken with is still fresh. Foreign powers talk about Greenland in terms of value. Greenlanders talk about it in terms of home. That gap matters. Resource development and the environmental gamble. Extracting Greenland's mineral wealth is not straightforward. Mining in Arctic conditions is expensive. Infrastructure must be built from scratch. Environmental risks are high. Rare earth extraction, in particular, produces toxic waste. Managing that waste in a fragile Arctic ecosystem is enormously challenging. Greenland faces a brutal trade-off. Exploit resources and gain economic leverage, or preserve the environment and remain financially dependent. There is no perfect answer. What makes the decision harder is that external pressure rarely aligns with local timelines. Global demand for rare earths is accelerating now. Climate change is accelerating now. Strategic competition is accelerating now. Greenland is being asked to decide the future faster than any society should have to. Denmark's shrinking role. For Denmark, Greenland is both a responsibility and a vulnerability. It provides Denmark with Arctic relevance far beyond what its size would otherwise grant. It also exposes Denmark to pressures it cannot fully control. Copenhagen must balance alliance commitments, Greenlandic autonomy, and international law. It must resist coercion without escalating tension. Denmark's strategy has been to internationalize the issue quietly, keep Greenland anchored in NATO frameworks, encourage cooperation rather than confrontation. But Denmark knows the reality. If Greenland ever becomes independent, Denmark's leverage drops sharply. And independence is no longer a distant idea. It is an active political conversation. The coming infrastructure wave. The next decade will define Greenland's trajectory. Not through declarations, through construction. Airports, ports, energy grids, communications networks. Who builds them matters more than who talks about them. Infrastructure locks in relationships. It determines who maintains systems, who trains workers, who supplies spare parts. Once built, it shapes alignment for decades. This is why the competition over Greenland is less visible than other geopolitical flashpoints. There are no tanks, no blockades, no ultimatums, just contracts. And contracts decide futures. Why Greenland is a preview of the future. Greenland is not unique. It is a preview. A sparsely populated region, rich in resources, strategically located, caught between great powers, facing climate transformation. This pattern will repeat in the Arctic, in parts of Africa, in the deep ocean, in space. The rules being tested in Greenland will shape how future frontiers are contested. Will influence be earned through partnership or imposed through leverage? Will development respect local voices or override them? Will climate change be managed cooperatively or exploited competitively? Greenland forces these questions into the open. Final reflection. Greenland is not a prize waiting to be claimed. It is a responsibility waiting to be handled wisely. The ice is melting whether humanity is ready or not. The routes are opening whether diplomacy keeps pace or not. The competition is intensifying whether small societies consent or not. What happens in Greenland will not stay in Greenland. It will echo across the world. Because the Arctic is no longer the edge of the map, it is the center of the next one. Greenland is no longer a distant, frozen place at the edge of the map. It is where the future of power, resources, and global influence is quietly taking shape. As the ice melts, the real story is being revealed. Not just about territory, but about choices. Who controls the next trade routes? Who secures the materials that power modern life? And who decides the fate of the people living on the front lines of climate change? What happens in the Arctic will not stay in the Arctic. It will shape the world you live in. If you want to keep uncovering the hidden power struggles, untold histories, and geopolitical shifts shaping our future, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications so you don't miss what comes next.